Good evening. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. Tonight we'll talk about the July 15th coup attempt on its first anniversary and how it's perceived by the West with Al Monitor and Diken columnist Amberin Zaman. Good evening, Ms. Zaman. Welcome to Mediascope.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Zaman, so far we've seen that both the US and Europe have been pretty hesitant to fully acknowledge the exiled cleric Fethullah Gülen's involvement in the July 15th coup attempt. What do you think is the main reason behind this hesitation?
Well, there are several reasons for the hesitation, as you describe it, and the first very obvious reason is that there's an ongoing court case inside Turkey focusing on his involvement, on the involvement of people thought to be part of his broader movement that have yet to be concluded. There are actually several court cases. And until judgment has been reached, I don't think that any foreign government feels that it's in a position to, declare Mr. Gülen either innocent or guilty in advance of the Turkish courts, having made that conclusion, even though obviously the government has already declared that Mr. Gülen is indeed guilty. But as I said, there is a parallel sort of court process that's going on. But setting aside the sort of legal side of all of this, the fact that inside Turkey we have this very alarming and rapid decline in the human rights situation, the fact that you have these massive purges ongoing still, hundreds of people being jailed, being removed from their jobs, academics, journalists in jail, members of the security forces, all these businesses being shuttered, and in fact, on very often, some would say, thin evidence. So all of this obviously is not helping Turkey's image abroad, as it were. And so a lot of the conversation about Turkey is not so much about whether Mr. Gülen is to blame or not, but much more focused on, as I described, this alarming deterioration in the human rights climate, in the erosion of the rule of law in Turkey, this idea that the government is becoming increasingly authoritarian, and indeed, some would say, sliding into some form of a dictatorship.
Ms. Zaman, as you know, the Gülen movement is known to have a very strong diaspora network, not only in the US, but also in different parts of the world. So can you tell us how this movement is currently doing in the United States? How active are they with their operations?
Well, of course, the Turkish government is mounting a very sort of fierce campaign against them, bringing a lot of pressure on governments worldwide to shut down schools. We know that obviously the United States is facing this demand from Turkey that it extradite Fethullah Gülen. And it's clear that certainly at a government level, there is distance being put between, governments worldwide and members of the Gülen movement. They don't have the same kind of access that they used to, principally because they worry about the reaction they'll face from the Turkish government. But having said that, as you rightly pointed out, the Gülen movement has an extremely sophisticated PR network, and you can see this very easily on the social media, where they have multiple accounts where they're tweeting in English, focusing on all the sort of human rights abuses inside Turkey, the miscarriages of justice, the fact that over 150 journalists are in jail, highlighting some of the more sort of, let's say, unfair cases that are being brought against people, things like individuals being told Gülen is just on the basis that a dollar bill was found in their home, or publications by Gülen were found in their home. This sort of thing obviously helps them sort of strengthen their case, the argument that in fact this is all just being manipulated by the government to sort of cover up the fact that in fact, as they claim, this was in fact a staged coup.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Zaman, we now have a news video to watch on the post-July 15th purges against those individuals allegedly linked to the Gülenist network. We'll keep you on the line, and then we'll be back in the studio to continue our conversation shortly.
5 days after the failed coup attempt of July 15th, the Turkish government declared a state of emergency for 3 months, which has later been extended until today. The state of emergency came with a huge wave of arrests, detentions, and sackings. According to an official statement by the Ministry of Justice, as of today, there are 50,477 people under arrest accused of having links to the Fethullahist terrorist organization known as FETÖ. This number includes 169 generals, 7,098 colonels and lower-ranking soldiers, more than 8,000 police department members, and 2,413 judiciary members. The ministry also announced that more than 100,000 suspects have yet to face legal proceedings on suspicion of links to FETÖ since last year's coup attempt. The operations following the failed attempt have been coupled with purges in public institutions. From July 2016 until February 2017, more than 100,000 public servants were dismissed with decrease in force of law due to alleged links to the FETÖ organization. 33,099 of those purged were from the Ministry of Education, 24,031 from the Ministry of Interior, and 8,816 from the Turkish Armed Forces. 30 publishing houses and 182 associations were dissolved. 180 media outlets were closed down and 159 journalists were jailed. 15 universities were shut down and 8,427 academics were expelled with decrees. This number includes 372 peace academics who have been targeted by the government for signing a peace declaration in January 2016, condemning the military crackdown in Kurdish majority cities. In total, 23,427 academics have lost their jobs either due to universities being shut down, tenures being withdrawn, or by being expelled due to executive decrees.
Welcome back, Ms. Zaman. So as you know, German authorities recently denied permission to Erdogan to hold a July 15th commemoration event during his visit in Hamburg for the G20 summit. What, in your opinion, is the reason behind this decision? Is it that Germany is still not convinced that Gülen is behind this coup attempt, or is it because of the recently tensed relations between the two countries?
Well, we know that, at least from the media, that the German intelligence has basically decided that there is not compelling evidence that Fethullah Gülen actually masterminded this coup, and we've seen similar reports coming out of other Western intelligence agencies. The European Union's intelligence outfit, I don't recall its name, published something along similar lines. But I don't think the fact that Germany has banned, or rather not agreed to let Mr. Erdogan conduct this rally in Germany is linked to its conviction that Gülen is innocent. Rather, I think it has to do with the fact that you have a very large Turkish diaspora inside Germany. Some say around 3 million people who are originally from Turkey living in Germany, and the fear that this might provoke some kind of confrontation and unrest and violence. I think that's the main concern that the German authorities would have with Mr. Erdogan making a speech there that some or many might take offense at and may then decide to sort of attack people who support him. I think it's really more about law and order than politics per se.
Mm-hmm. Let's shift our focus from Europe to the US now for a little bit. A recent remark by the US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson echoed widely here in the local media. Tillerson said, I quote, "I think we're beginning to rebuild some of that trust that we lost in one another. They lost our trust to a certain extent and we lost theirs." So what does this statement really mean for US-Turkey relations, in your opinion?
I think it's much more to do with what's happening inside Syria, because you know that there's this huge sort of tension that's built up between the United States and Turkey over the US alliance with the Syrian Kurdish People's Protection Units, the YPG, which has close links, as we all know, with the PKK. And I think that when he said that, he was referring primarily to that aspect. But also, obviously, there is a lot of tension because the United States has so far refused to extradite Fethullah Gülen. And additionally, of course, there's that other case of the Iranian-Turkish gold trader Reza Zarrab that's ongoing, and Turkey would very much like the United States to extradite him as well. And again, the United States so far has shown no interest in doing so. But when Tillerson says he wants to rebuild trust, as I said, I think he's talking more about confidence-building measures inside Syria. Things like, assuring Turkey that once the Raqqa operation is over, that the weapons that were delivered to the YPG will then be reclaimed by the United States. Of course, Turkey greets such assurances with, I would say, justified skepticism. But there'll be other things like assuring them that the Raqqa Governing Council, for instance, won't be dominated by the YPG. A number of things that they're obviously working on, because there is, I would say, a very strong recognition by Secretary Tillerson, but equally by Secretary Mattis, the Defense Secretary, that Turkey is a very important ally. And as you know, in his remarks to US diplomats in Istanbul, Mr. Tillerson referred to Turkey's geographic location, a gift from nature, as he, which means that whoever rules Turkey, whether it's Mr. Erdogan or someone else, Turkey will always remain a very important strategic partner for the United States, and there's a strong desire to rebuild the relationship and to rebuild trust.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the United States' refusal to extradite Fethullah Gülen in your response, and that constitutes my final question to you. So how realistic is it to even talk about such a possibility? Is the extradition of Fethullah Gülen in the cards at all?
I don't think you can rule it out entirely because the executive under US law actually does have a say over all of this, if not a final say. It's clear to me that, Gülen's defense team will cite the fact that even if he were extradited, he would not be getting a fair trial inside Turkey. And he's going to cite probably what's called the political offense exception defense. It's a rather difficult term. But, in the final analysis, when the State Department is asked for its opinion, as it inevitably will be, I don't think that it would be entirely unsympathetic to the Turkish case against Fethullah Gülen. Certainly not this administration, the Trump administration. I think it will be more approaching the whole issue not from a purely, rule of law, justice perspective, but will be taking a far more pragmatic approach to it and weighing the costs and benefits of, extraditing him or not. I don't think at this point we can entirely rule out the possibility that he may be extradited. Having said that, and the fact that, as we mentioned earlier, the Gülen movement has a very sophisticated propaganda machine that's, in full blast here and in Europe. I think there's also growing recognition and I think a closer sort of focus now, or spotlight rather, being shown on the movement itself, and recognition that, it's not quite as innocent as it makes itself out to be. There is widespread consensus, I would say, certainly in the think tank community here, that while it's impossible to prove that Gülen masterminded the coup, that many Gülen loyalists, certainly in the army, may have well taken part in the coup, and that there was a gradual build-up towards this, starting with the attempt to prosecute Hakan Fidan, the head of Turkey's national intelligence, over his role in promoting the Oslo peace process, which is one that was deemed to be a very, good and wise initiative on the part of the Turkish government by the European Union, and certainly here in the United States. The fact that they went after him, and it's a lot of people agree that perhaps they played a role in leaking the minutes of the Oslo meetings, which in turn, of course, derailed that whole process. Other things like the corruption probe in December 2013, this gradual build-up where on each occasion Erdogan prevailed, leading the Gülen movement. But when we say Gülen movement, obviously, we can't ever claim that everyone who is loyal to Fethullah Gülen is guilty by association, and this collective punishment of the members of the Gülen movement obviously is backfiring and obviously creating a very negative impression abroad. So we need to underline that. But let's say the sort of people who were, in the operational, if you will, part of this movement, who were very much focused on trying to overthrow Erdogan, I think it's clear that there was this sort of very concerted attempt to do that, which may well have culminated in their involvement in the July 15th coup attempt. But there's also, I think, widespread consensus that it wasn't solely Gülenists who were involved, but also other officers, Kemalists, nationalists in the army who are opposed to President Erdogan, who will have taken part in it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Ms. Zaman, for your comments and for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
The first anniversary of the July 15th coup attempt will be commemorated throughout the country this weekend. President Erdogan is expected to give a speech on Saturday night at the presidential complex in Ankara.
The first anniversary of last year's failed coup attempt is being commemorated all across Turkey this week. On Tuesday, President Erdogan and Prime Minister Yildirim visited the graves of those killed in the attempted coup to mark the beginning of the nationwide commemoration. The July 15th Democracy and National Unity Day events will be held under the auspices of the presidency and will last until Sunday evening. Various other activities have also been organized by different non-governmental organizations, municipalities, and institutions to commemorate the event. Throughout the week, announcements were shared on mainstream and social media, and banners were posted all across the country. On Thursday, a commemoration ceremony was held at the presidential complex. Prayers were said for the July 15th martyrs in the National Mosque located inside the presidential complex. On Saturday and Sunday, multiple commemorative ceremonies will be held across the country, especially in Istanbul and Ankara. On Saturday evening, the National Unity March will start in Istanbul through the Bosphorus Bridge, which has a symbolic importance for the resistance against the coup attempt. A special Quran recitation with the attendance of President Erdogan will mark the beginning of Saturday night's commemoration event. Erdogan is expected to give a speech at 10:30 p.m. At 13 a.m., the Salah prayers will be recited in all of the mosques across the country, and the prayers will mark the start of the Democracy Watch. At 2 a.m., a commemoration ceremony will be held in the Turkish parliament with the attendance of President Erdogan. After the ceremony in the parliament, At 7:02 exactly, Quran recitations will start in all mosques in Turkey. Lastly, at 4:50 a.m., the dawn prayer will be performed at the National Mosque. The main opposition party, CHP, and its leader Kılıçdaroğlu had decided not to attend the ceremonies since they were not invited by the presidency. However, after an official invitation, they announced their decision to attend the ceremonies to be held in the assembly. The CHP leader is also expected to give a speech there. On the other hand, People's Democratic Party, HDP, will not attend to the ceremonies since their co-leaders are in prison.
Ömer Taşpınar from the Brookings Institution talked about the Gülen movement and the debate on moderate Islam for Medyascope TV's weekly Turkish language news show, Transatlantic.
Now, in my opinion, it is impossible for this movement to find a place for itself in Turkey. Hence, this has become a diaspora movement of some sorts. In diaspora, abroad, probably in democratic countries, in countries where Turkey does not have more power. It does not have the possibility of existing, for example, in Africa or Central Asia because Turkey may close schools and end their activities there. However, this movement will continue as a diaspora movement in countries where Turkey cannot easily influence, in Western countries where there is a constitutional government and democracy, in the US, in Canada, in Europe. Now this movement has some things to say on behalf of Islam. All in all, this movement was an Islamic movement. Therefore, if we look at the conflict between Islam and the West, irrespective of the situation in Turkey, we see that there is a clash of civilizations beginning especially with Trump, and there is a discourse which targets Islam under the title of Islamic terrorism, radical terrorism, jihadist terrorism, and separates the Western civilization from Islam. For example, Trump's speech in Poland last week was clearly the speech of the clash of civilizations. Today, for example, ISIS being extinguished from Mosul and will be extinguished from Raqqa as well. But what will replace ISIS? What kind of a solution will be in order? Those who find radical Islam problematic say the solution will be Islam, but the moderate kind. Therefore, when we look into the Islamic world, we see that one of the mildest Islamic movements stemmed from Turkey and gained a global dimension. The image of this movement in the West, independent from Turkey, is pretty clean because they don't even believe this movement is radical, apart from the terrorist movement, as I said earlier. When they hear the word radical terrorist, the thing that comes to their minds is the jihadist movement. The fact that this movement is not one of them is officially registered by their activities. In Turkey, it is desired to be called as terrorism, but most of the intellectuals who take themselves seriously in Turkey don't even want to use the term FETÖ because they can't fully associate it with terrorism. It is true that they sneaked into the army, but you can't define this fellowship as a terror movement like Al-Qaeda or ISIS. This is a binary structure. It may have sneaked into the state, but when it is considered as a terrorist organization, the West stops at a point. And the state of affairs and the state of Erdogan is important. The state of affairs in Turkey is one in which there is authority based upon the disengagement from the West. And where there is no freedom of thought, it gives this movement a right to respond, as I've said earlier. Consequently, I think the prestige of the Fethullah Gülen movement in the West has increased.
CHP leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu completed his March for Justice on Sunday. The 450-kilometer march came to an end with a public rally in Istanbul.
Main opposition Republican People's Party, CHP leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, has completed his 25-day Justice March with a massive rally on Istanbul's Asian coast on July 9th. After walking for a total of 450 kilometers from Ankara to Istanbul, the 69-year-old Kılıçdaroğlu walked alone for the final kilometer of the Justice March to arrive in the rally area. On the final day, Kılıçdaroğlu walked with a banner reading "Justice," similar to the previous days. While hundreds of thousands of people were waiting for Kılıçdaroğlu, rights, law, justice was the most frequently chanted slogan during the rally. In his speech, the final day of the Justice March is a new beginning and a new step. It's not the end of a march. It's a day of peace and a joint will for life, Kılıçdaroğlu said. He described the post-coup attempt measures, which came with the state of emergency declared on July 20, 2016, as the July 20 civil coup, differentiating it from the July 15th coup attempt. The CHP leader read out a 10-item list of demands named as the call for democracy, vowing to continue struggling until these demands are met. The demands uttered by Kılıçdaroğlu included revealing the political leg of the third coup, giving back parliament its authority, lifting the state of emergency, putting an end to the civil death of state of emergency victims, securing judicial independence, releasing jailed lawmakers and journalists, re-establishing a strong parliamentary democracy, ending poverty and unemployment, and pursuing a peaceful, fair foreign policy. In addition to the CHP, the People's Democratic Party, HDP, and many labor unions also attended the Justice Rally. On the other hand, only Turkish flags, banners reading "Justice," and pictures of Atatürk were allowed in the area upon the request of Kılıçdaroğlu. After the Justice Rally, Kılıçdaroğlu visited Maltepe prison, where CHP deputy Enis Berberoğlu is under arrest. On the next day, he returned to Ankara via ground transport. The day after the rally, President Erdogan harshly criticized the rally and Kılıçdaroğlu. If you call on the people to take to the streets, it will be you who will not be able to step out in the end, Erdogan said. The name of the justice sought in the streets is revenge. The end of this is vandalism. The legitimate grounds in the search for justice are well known, he added.
Medyascope TV's chief editor Ruşen Çakır commented on the Gülen movement and the July 15th coup attempt for Medyascope this week.
We can clearly say that this movement will continue to exist unless some serious measures are taken against Fethullah Gülen himself and his network, and unless this issue is fully elucidated. So this is what is happening right now. But on the other hand, there is not much reason of being hopeful, as I repeatedly said in nearly most of my previous speeches. Since there is no real intention to confront this issue, they think they can handle the situation solely by labeling people as evil terrorists or FETÖ, in other words, Gülenist terrorists. Firstly, this can be due to their concern that in case there is a deeper investigation into the issue, their past partnership with this structure may be revealed. Secondly, they may not really know how to fight against this network. However, the primary way of fighting against such network is and should absolutely be democracy, transparency, clearness, and pluralism. Nonetheless, since those who govern Turkey are strangers to such concepts or have become strangers to them, they can't be successful in dealing with such a dark and shady network. Their failure comes out as the success of Fethullah Gülen. We are facing such a pathetic truth at the moment.
Our friend Elif Akbıyık did an interview on Wednesday with Cuban jazz pianist Roberto Fonseca before his concert at Unique Istanbul, which took place as part of the ongoing Istanbul Jazz Festival.
I mean, being Cuba, traveling the world, and return to Cuba, that's very, I mean, for me, I will always return to Cuba. That's why I'm all the time I'm saying that I'm proud to be Cuba. I'm really happy to defend my culture. My culture is really big, huge, beautiful, so rich, and then it's really open at the same time. Because when I was playing with Ibrahim Ferrer, Buena Vista Salsa Club, that was like a school, you know. I was studying the traditional Cuban music. I'm always saying that I wasn't there just for the business. I was there for learn how to really play the traditional Cuban music, and they teach me. You know, Ibrahim Ferrer trust on me, Guajiros Mirabal trust on me, Cachayito Lopez trust on me, and then all those great musicians they trust on me. They teach me a lot of things. You know, and music is not only about notes. It's not only about theoretic things. You know, there's some secret. They will only know if one musician will tell you. So from one musician to another musician. So they at the same time traveling, touring with them, see how they was living on the tour, how was speaking each other. That give you a lot of things. At the same time, you learn from there a lot of things too. So that's confirmed what my family was teaching me. And when I met Ibrahim, he supported me. That was touching the sky with music. It was beautiful. I mean, and thanks to him, I'm a part of the musician that I am now. I'm feeling really happy because the response of the public is really great. I mean, we have been making a lot of tours. I mean, we did already a lot of concerts, and people became crazy about the album. And then when you see that, that means that you're on the right way, you know. And I'm defending my culture, you know, because I've been doing a lot of things with African, maybe a little bit more mixed Cuban and Brazil, or maybe Cuban and classical, whatever. But this album is who I am, because it's my point of view, it's my way to show to the people the history of Cuban music, you know, from the 50s, from the 60s. And when you see people dancing, laughing, crying, became crazy in the concerts, that's magic. You know?
Now let's have a look at what's on in Istanbul next week.
The Ways of Seeing exhibition can be viewed until the 13th of August in Artaş, an international group exhibition created by Sam Bardui and Tilfelrat, founders of the multidisciplinary curatorial platform Art Reoriented and co-chairman of the Mont Blanc Cultural Foundation. Taking its cue from John Berger's 1972 groundbreaking text on visual culture, the eponymous exhibition explores the various formalistic strategies that artists employ to reconfigure our perception of the world. Ways of Seeing brings together 33 artists, a majority of whom will be exhibited for the first time in Turkey. The exhibition consists of 70 works, ranging from 1000 before Christ to the present and spanning a variety of media from painting, sculpture, and photography to sound, film, and installation.
Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 9 p.m. Goodbye.